Have you been scared of growing plants, aroids, especially things like Anthurium, because you're constantly being told that they're fussy and need really high humidity? Well, not true, especially in New Zealand. So, watch along to hear a very detailed explanation of how I grow my Anthurium in ambient humidity in New Zealand. Hi, my name's Danielle. This is Hunter, and this is Vara, and we live in the Bay of Plenty in New Zealand, and I have a fascination with all things houseplants. Well, a bit of an addiction. So, I figure, why not come on here, have a chat, and help to make sure that you can grow these beautifully in your home without stress, and to share the joy of new plants coming on the market, things I can find, what I'm growing in my adventure with hybridizing and breeding my own Anthurium. So, let's get into it. So, I thought I would just quickly run you through what makes a plant able to handle ambient humidity easier, at what stages I slowly introduce them to ambient, and how a plant will show if it's adapting to ambient or not. So, let's start easily. Why do these plants actually need higher humidity? So, big thing about all of these videos and how I talk to people about plants is I don't want to just tell you they need this humidity and that's that. I want you to understand why they need it, how they use it, and if you know that, it's a lot easier to figure out how to make them happy without it. So a lot of our Anthurium grow in the cloud forest. So we think super warm tropical forest with lots of light? Not necessarily. These guys are growing high up in the cloud layer, which means lower temperatures, insane humidity, and often less light because that cloud layer is hiding them from the light. So I do find these guys don't need crazy lighting. So through the summer months, especially, I have no grow lights. Kind of dead of winter, they will get supplemental. And it's never a lot, but it's just to kind of buffer that window where they're getting a lot less light each day. So maybe 4 hours starting early in the morning, so they have an extra 4 hours of light before the sun is up. And that does plenty. There's a lot of discussion around whether or not these dark Anthurium actually have much better colouring and show up darker if they're grown with less light. So, worth playing around with. The other thing is, up there in a cloud, tons of humidity. It's always there. And that's great for these plants because they don't grow in soil. Most of them epiphytes, so they grow on rocks, up trees, something like that, where they aren't actually in a soil. Which is why they need to get humidity out of the air, or bits of water, humidity, condensation coming down whatever they're growing on, and then their roots suck whatever moisture they can out of the bits of wood, bark, moss, what might have kind of gathered out of condensation onto a rock or something, but they don't have roots in soil drawing water up, really. So, they absorb water through their leaves as well. So, constant humidity means whether it's raining or not, they constantly have a source of water, which means you can balance lower humidity by making sure they have constant access to moisture and water in their pots. Now, if you're going to do that, you may have already clicked, that is hard to do without getting root rot unless you're being quite careful. So, what do? We do things like keeping them in clear pots so you can really carefully assess how much moisture is in that pot, because you don't want them sitting in water, but you do want them having access to moisture. The other thing is, whilst they need access to moisture, which we are now giving them through their pot, they still need constant access to oxygen. So that's where the popularity of things like chunky arid mixes came in. I've got that influences chunky soil mix song going on in my head. Anyway, so they still need access to oxygen. So we use chunky mixes. Luckily here in New Zealand we do have cheaper access to tree fern fibre which is amazing because the way it's structured, it doesn't break down and become a mess that gets dense around the roots very easily, and Anthuriums love it. But I do find that on its own is way too dense, especially once they start getting the chunkier roots. So, how do you choose what to do? That will depend on your home environment. Unfortunately, I will never give you an answer that is purely, this is what to do, follow it directly. Sorry, but that is not the best advice in the long run for your plants. So I choose what mix to put my plants in depending on what's going on with my environment. So for a really long time, I only grew in a chunky aroid mix with tree fern fibre. So I might amend it with supplemental things like worm castings, but I wouldn't change the main structure of what I planted them in. But last weekend, I repotted every single Anthurium I own, apart from the ones that had something like brand new emergent that I didn't want to damage. So, let's look at why. Why did I repot my entire collection in one weekend? Well, a couple of reasons, but one major one spurring that on. Also, it's a later time in the afternoon, so free range Chaos Kitten is actually kind of keen for a cuddle. So, one, I had quite a few Anthurium needing either an up pot, or they'd been in that pot with the same substrate for quite a long time, which generally means for me, I want to make sure I can go in there, fluff it up, check if it is getting too old. So some of the elements in a chunky aroid mix, like the barks, actually do need replacing about once a year. So if the mix is really old and it's showing signs of starting to break down, I'll dump it. If it isn't, and it's a newer mix, but it needs an up pot and I'm changing my potting mix, I will just recycle that. So I'll keep it to one side, use the new mix, and then once I'm at a point where I'm running out of the mixed new mix, it's ready to go, I will take that old substrate that is still fine and add the new amendments to it, because I'm not changing what I use to a crazy degree, I'm just changing ratios and water retention abilities. So for instance, this time I was using a lot of my old mix but adding in soil, which I didn't think I'd ever add back into my mixes, but here we are. So the reason I did that, my plants need constant access to moisture and I'm scared of root rot, which is caused by lack of oxygen. So I had them in a very chunky mix, which worked really well for me. Unfortunately, I got Chaos Kitten. She is an indoor cat because I am terrified of losing her. My old cat is gone. We've got no idea where, why, whatever. It's been a long time. We did all the things. I pray that one day his chip gets scanned, but there is nothing else I can do. So she is an indoor cat. This means my windows aren't getting opened and I'm not really getting much airflow that way. So I got fans. The fans are drying everything out a lot more than windows ever did. But I did find with constant access to moisture and the windows always closed, I was having issues where my plants were drawing up that moisture and then didn't have a way to get rid of it if they had too much. So the edges of the leaves were getting melty and then crisping off. And unfortunately they need help with that, with airflow helping them to evaporate it off and things like that, and they weren't getting it. So fans led to them drying out faster and I could not water them enough, and I don't have the money right now to swap every single plant into self-watering. So the solution, I added soil back in. I did make sure to get a soil that was ideal for seedlings, so they did have some stuff in there to help stop it getting super dense around little baby roots. The dog is finding noisy toys to play with, but I'm on a roll, so let's keep going. So I did get something decent. I went with higher quality. I'm not using a ton of it, so I don't need to buy it cheap and in bulk. I ended up going with Dalton's seedling mix. There were some other options I liked the look of online. However, once I added shipping, it was going to be way too expensive. So I was looking at things like the Sea Cliffs Organic Living Soil, which sounds amazing, but I can't justify that sort of price for soil. So I went with the Dalton seed mix. Not the cheapest soil you're going to find, but I thought it was a good mix for what I wanted. I didn't add a ton of it, so it's not like the whole mix was that, but I put it in to help with a bit more water retention. It's only been a week, but I'd say so far it is definitely working. I am having to water the ones in the old mix a lot more often, which, given it's only been a week, tells you how quickly they were drying out. There are very few plants still in that old mix. There's one of them, as you can tell by the green tape, but that shiny colourful emergent is why it isn't repotted yet. So anyway, new mix. It is helping them maintain moisture. I still have a lot of chunkiness in there, so there are still things like leca, bit of leftover pon, chunky aroid mix, and tree fern fibre in there. I would never put my Anthurium in pure soil because I am a overwaterer and I need to know my limits, but a small amount of soil is helping. Anyway, so all of that to say, make sure they have constant access to moisture in the pot, but be very careful to make sure that you're still allowing them to have oxygen around their roots. They don't want to dry out, but they don't want to be living in a swamp. Now, there are exceptions. Clarinervium. They are not from the cloud forest or the tropical rainforest. They are more from Mexico. They can handle drying out. Anything with clary in it, you're bound to find much thicker roots, and they've got quite hard leaves that can hold a lot of moisture, things like that. They don't need as much water. Another thing to keep in mind, once they're big and pushing big leaves, even when they're a bit smaller, but especially the big boys, when they are pushing those huge emergents, they use a lot of water to balloon it out and get it up to size. So if you're used to having a plant in a certain substrate and it only uses its water and needs watering once a week, if it has a huge emergent coming in, it will need more. So I will never be able to tell you water your Anthurium once a week. It depends so much on the substrate, the amount of airflow, the temperatures, the ambient humidity, everything. So what I do is keep all of my Anthurium in clear pots. Then I can really easily see. So here is my clary, and you can see all that condensation in the pot. I know he doesn't need water. I tend to, with my claries, not water until there's virtually no signs of moisture. So no condensation and none of these dark points where a wet substrate is sitting against the pot. For something that is a very thirsty plant, I will make sure it's in self-watering so there are no risks. Or something really fussy. So for instance, my Bessay F, Bessay hybrids, they prefer never drying out. They are quite thirsty. They struggle a bit more with ambient. They're going to be in self-watering. I'm not taking any sort of risk with them. So yeah. Now, the stages. That's one thing. Cool. That's all done and good. Next thing. When they are babies, I will give them a controlled environment for humidity. I refuse to put my big grown plants in something like a grow tent or a cabinet for my day-to-day life because I buy plants to enjoy looking at them. I want to wake up, open my eyes and see my plants. I do not want to have to purposefully go out of the way and open a grow tent or something to see them. I also don't have the money to outkit massive cabinets to fit them. And I don't want to have to try to keep up with keeping some of these really big plants in cabinets. Then you kind of have to go to a grow tent, and I just don't want to fill my small house. So the reason I'm sitting in front of these, like I'm living in a commercial growing situation. I try really hard with things like you can see shelving. I actually like window ledge with the metal and the wood. So the shelves that
you
don't
can see them a bit more on camera,
light,
quite
so
often
the
with
sun
the
comes up
angles.
over there, and as it comes
So
up,
I've got my grow lights under the shelves, but this also means they won't get much light at all.
do get
A chunk of light.
when I'm stood up.
This shelf here does have
doing
grow
whatever.
lights
I
because
can't
it
see the grow
gets
lights,
some light, but just not enough.
but
Things
everything
like that, I do
else
try really
down
hard to make sure my space
has
still
grow
looks
lights because
nice,
it's where I
even
keep
with this
all my
many
seedlings
Anthuriums
and things.
kind of cluttering it up.
They
Part of that
have
is I don't
really
want grow
controlled
tents
humidity.
everywhere.
Everything else is perfect.
So,
So
if their light is only from a grow
I do
light,
need to
I'm not too
make
worried.
concessions though. So
On
on
these
these
shelves, the way I
and
looked
that's
at a
why
lot
I'm
of my
sat in front
plant
of
care
these ones
is so. I have.
hold on,
Dog has
someone's
a bone
just
to
arrived.
Let me
walk
pause
too
this so it doesn't muck up all the audio.
So,
the adults, they have not great humidity. And my view is always with the plants, I will sacrifice on one aspect and try to keep the rest as good as I possibly can. So, they don't have the best humidity. I try to make sure they've got really ideal lighting, really ideal temperatures, really ideal moisture, feed, all of that. And then they do pretty okay with the humidity. I try to keep things as good as possible across the board for everything else. So the babies have everything great, apart from maybe they could do with a touch more light at times, but with everything else being fine, I'm not going to worry too much about it. So, let's go through all the stages of life for my Anthurium. Here I have seedling tray, a lid I can completely close. So these guys are 100% humidity right now. There's my seedling tray, and if you look close you can see some little bits of green in some of those. So, they start growing 100% humidity. Absolutely. Babies don't need the stress of adapting to anything. And they have grow lights on about 12 hours a day. More light isn't always better. Plants do tend to grow when the lights are off. So they kind of spend the day sucking up everything they need and laying down the groundwork, and then you'll quite often see actual growth happening at night. As far as I know, I haven't sat and stared at them, but that's what the smarter people than me I've heard have said. So anyway, after that, once they're big enough to kind of go into pots, I will move them into the same tray, but with the little pots taken out. And then I will slowly open up the holes on the top to get them used to a little bit more. One thing to keep in mind, 100% humidity. Make things damp. Don't have water sitting around in there. The water ain't going anywhere. It's evaporating, hitting the top, coming back down when it cools. It is a closed system. So I'll make sure there's moisture in the pot, how I like them being out here, and then I'll check it, but they shouldn't need watering. They shouldn't need watering much. Obviously they are using some up, but it might be weeks in between. Once you've got some holes on the top and you've got plants that are pushing new leaves fairly consistently, even if they're small, they won't be using a lot, but they will be using some. But it does take quite a while for them to actually go through it. Also, interesting point that actually got me quite a bit. I kept watching videos of YouTubers in America or Europe or North America, and they would always talk about how over winter these guys would go on seed mats for heat. I have killed so many baby plants thinking I was doing good by putting them on a seed mat. I do not get cold enough in my space. I've done so much better since I got rid of the bloody seed mats. And this was a recent discovery. Mainly because last winter I was in the stage and didn't put anything on a seed mat. Nothing got that much attention. And I didn't have many babies last winter. Coming into this winter, I thought I was doing good and I pulled out my trusty seed mat and boom, I was running into issues. And so I went, okay, I need to not go off what I assume is right and really look into things and question my own care. because when things are going badly and you don't immediately know what's wrong, question your own care. So sometimes that will mean I go and ask friends and troubleshoot. For instance, when I was running into issues with the excess water around the leaves, I was really exhausted from Kitten. Started because the dog wouldn't sleep until she loved him. And then it continued because now the kitten loved the dog and wanted to play with him all night. So I was sleep deprived and I was struggling to keep on top of things, and I had a leaf come out on my Black Widow Michelle hybrid and the edge mushed and crisped, and I had a couple of similar issues on my large crystallinum. So I messaged Anna from Love That Leaf and another good plant friend saying, hey, look at this, what do you think it is? Because I'm struggling to think. My friend came back saying airflow, and Anna from Love That Leaf came back saying inconsistent watering. I think they were both right. Airflow had become an issue now that I had Kitten, and with Kitten, not so much Black Widow Michelle, but I do think that's what happened to Mr. Crystal, because he was in a large decorative pot because he was such a big boy. He's now just on a dinner plate in his clear pot, and his new leaves are looking so much better. So, anyway, always question your own care, because you may have entered a rut, you may be exhausted, you might be tired, there might have been a change in environment that you haven't even picked up on, and it's affecting the plants. So, I might be talking to you about what's ideal and what these plants like, but the troubleshooting around how that fits into your environment can change based on what's going on in your life. So never feel like, I thought I was good with plants, so now I need to figure it out on my own. I think most people would come in here, look at my plants and say I'm doing pretty damn good with plants. I still message friends questions every single day. Actually, just today I messaged said friend and asked why her seedling of a specific plant was doing better than mine, and asked her what care she was giving it. Just to find out, because maybe that plant is a bit fussier and there's something she's doing with it that I'm not, and it could help. So don't ever feel like you need to be good enough at it to not talk. And on that note, I know some of New Zealand's top Anthurium breeders that travel overseas and talk to other top Anthurium breeders. Everyone talks and everyone helps each other. So always reach out, ask for help, talk to people, we all do it. Don't ever feel like you have to try to prove you're a great grower and not ask. There is no shame. So anyway, I started reanalyzing how I was looking after them and decided to try getting rid of the heat mat. And all of my seeds that were struggling are absolutely popping off now, apart from one or two that I did lose. And looking back, the first lot of Anthurium seeds I tried to germinate, I put on a heat mat, and I didn't have great germination success. So, instead of taking that as gospel, I'm now going to move forward and try that with my next seeds as well. And if I keep consistently having really good results, I'm happy. I think it's a case of I have grow lights that are emitting heat to a point. My space is climate controlled. I'm not trying to grow these out in a garage or a shed or a greenhouse or something like that. So we're all good. They aren't going to die. It's great temperature wise. No worries. I'm not stressing. So honestly, I'm not fussed about heat mats. But again, depends on your environment. Anyway, sorry, tangent. Slightly important tangent though, because a lot of the times when people are looking at babies and high humidity, they think about adding heat. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, after they've graduated that, they go into these. So, much taller, and helps me keep a really good eye on them and keeps them contained. And this isn't purely about humidity. A baby plant, if it's constantly having wind shoving its leaves around, might start putting a lot of effort into trying to grow away from the wind and pushing smaller leaves to try out different environments it can reach from its one pot. So I have fans in this room. Might not love it if a fan's hitting it directly. It keeps them safe from any potential pests coming in. Actually, probably less of an issue now that I've closed my windows. But, you know, I do get the odd pest on my plants, it stops these more vulnerable baby plants getting them. So one of my big plants, I will see a sign of pest, treat for pest, and have it gone relatively easily. If I try doing that with a baby, it's much harder, they're much more fragile, they don't love the pesticides and the treatments as much, so it is just a good idea to keep them nice, contained, safe. So, here is an example of a plant that wasn't loving Ambient. Here is a Bessier, who are kind of notorious for being a little bit fussy, at least the Bessier F, from what I've seen. So you can see that rip, little bits of deformity. I'm leaving it in here for longer than I would most plants because I know it's not entirely happy. And my Bessier hybrid that wasn't happy took a long time to adjust to Ambient. Keeping in mind, that means ripped leaves, not dying because of Ambient issues. The roots were still healthy, the stem was still healthy, it just wasn't pretty. But yeah, so my babies stay in here while they figure their life out. Sorry, I saw one that was quite pretty. It sucks a little bit in the way that with these guys I want to constantly check them because it's exciting and I want to make sure that they're growing well and all of that. But it's okay. So you can hopefully see there's a little bit of moisture under each pot, but there is not water just sitting in there. So I probably won't water in here until these pots are almost kind of dried out, because they are also getting humid water out of the air and the humidity. Now, because there isn't a ton of heat, it's not like you've got just a ton of moisture sitting about, but you can, when you take the lid off, feel moisture on the bottom of the lid and things. I did get in here and check on them all a little bit earlier, so there's a bit less visible, but I'm not too worried. They are doing better in there, and I don't expect this to be as high of a humidity as like a sealed seedling tray or anything like that. I actually have, and that's part of it, popped screws into the corner of each of these, and it's not a lot. It's not very high. It's only maybe that high, like above, and all it does is keep that corner just the tiniest bit higher, allowing a little bit of air exchange to happen. And some of that is because these guys don't have to be 100% humidity. They're in here because I'm babying them, not because they'll die in Ambient. It's a mix of they're young, it's coming into winter, I want to baby them, and they're really young, I'd like them to mature a little bit faster, and they might have a rougher road to maturing if they are in complete Ambient. However, I have plenty of friends that have plants this size and just put them straight into Ambient. Is what it is. There's a level of, if I bought it at a shop, so you can get those quite small TC babies that are fully planted up and have been out of their TC environments for a while. I know lots of people who, if they've bought them like that from a shop, they aren't going into any sort of humidity help and they survive just fine. I am just being a little bit fussy. Other issue being dog, cat, me working really long hours. These guys dry out faster in Ambient, and this means it's much less likely that I'll miss them for water. And yeah, I'm just telling you all the reasons so that if it isn't something you want to do, you know why I do it, so that you can figure out if it's right for you. And then they graduate up into just being on my shelves. Now, when they do that, or when I bring plants home from a shop that have been in greenhouses, grow tents, etc., I sometimes see, oh, I had a plant ready for this. Here he is. Things like this. That is a hole it got, ripping the leaf as it emerged. You can see how jagged the edge is there. this was a plant that did not love coming home to an ambient humidity. This is my Magret crystal, cross Pappy. But, so, that ripped broken thing there, that was its last leaf. Here's its new emergent. No rips, no tears, it's emerging beautifully. No problems at all. So, if you get a plant home and it was in, probably not like a storefront because that's much less likely to be humidity controlled, but if you've bought from someone who is breeding and growing their babies up in grow tents or greenhouses or something like that, where they've got just a big plant zone where they can change the humidity. So like if I had a plant room or somewhere that like was just purely for plants and I could crank that humidity and not worry, awesome, I would do it to support them. I don't have that. They live in my bedroom and I refuse to have a bedroom that's 90% humidity 24/7 because everything would rot and I'd feel disgusting. So when you bring them home from an environment like that, they need to adjust. That was his ugly adjusting leaf. And now I'm getting this beauty. So, don't fret. Also, random side note. If you have a plant that suddenly shoots a leaf up really high, so when it emerged, the emergent was like that big and the petiole was that long, quite often it means it's getting ready to balloon out a very nice big leaf. So my Regal Cross crystal, I'll try it in a photo actually if I can see it. I had a plant, you know, here's your normal plant level in the tops of all the other leaves, and then it was just like woo, bumping into the shelf above him, and he'd been nowhere near the top of the shelf above him before that. And the new leaf was like twice the length of the last one. So I get a bit excited when I see an emergent shooting sky high. It also means that emergent that is still like pink, it's nowhere near hardening off, is already as long as this ugly adjustment leaf. So I'm going to get a big upsize as well. And there was quite a big gap in between leaves, so he really took his time. Probably, I'd say a lot of it took his time, grew out his roots, got really settled in, got used to the environment, and then started pushing a beauty. So if your plant isn't dying, if it just gave you an ugly, but it's working away, the roots are healthy, everything else seems good, just let them figure you and your home out, and you can grow beauties. So anyway, on that note, I've been blabbing about humidity for half an hour. So anyway, all of that logic in what I just explained should help you to figure this out for any type of plant. Look at the plant, look at where it came from, look at how it normally grows, and build from there. So alocasia, I don't know a ton about every single genus, but quite often they are more in swampy, humid areas, as far as I'm aware. Swampy might not be the right word. Let's cuddle this out. So you can use this kind of guideline to figure out how to handle humidity for all plants. Any plant that loves humidity most likely needs that extra moisture. Take your time, figure out where the plant's from, what environment it would naturally like, and how you can supplement that, whilst remembering that it's good to try to make it so that your plant only has one big adjustment it has to make. For my Anthurium, that's humidity. If you can't handle giving them a ton of moisture, or you don't want to do constant watering, but you live in like a really tropical, humid as hell environment, awesome, you're good. If your lighting isn't great, but it's super humid, and they've got their moisture and all of that, and you can balance everything else out, they'll probably figure it out. But just try to make sure that your plant's only got one big adjustment to make. I actually find humidity is the easiest one to make, within reason. You know, we don't live in an arid desert environment, so we probably do get to make that adjustment a bit easier than most countries. So yeah, enjoy the fact that we live in a country where these beauties can grow relatively easily in Ambient, so long as you're accommodating for their needs in every other way that you can. And don't let it scare you off. My crystallinum never misses a beat. My clarinerviums, great. And as much as people talk about how finicky Anthuriums are and how tricky it can be to get a perfect leaf, remember, a not perfect leaf is them telling you what's wrong, which is amazing. Because alocasia quite often just go, you know what, I can go dormant, and they drop all their leaves and give up. And then you got to start again and try not to repeat the mistake even if you don't know what it was. Anthurium stay alive for yonks, giving you worse and worse leaves, trying to tell you what's going on and what they need from you. So if you can figure out how to listen to them, it's amazing. Alocasia scare me a little bit, not gonna lie. I do have quite a few that I grow okay. So metallic blue, dragon's breath, and pink dragon are the ones that I do the best with. And a lot of that is that they put up with me not being perfect with them. And I think a lot of it is if I only grew alocasia and if I could set up the perfect environments for them, I'm sure I'd do great. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of time, and I find the Anthurium suit my conditions best. So it kind of comes down to, I found a plant that I really love that suits my conditions, which makes it easier to grow. Don't get me wrong, alocasia look amazing, and I love the ones I have that do really well. But especially the dual alocasias take a lot more effort for me to keep growing well. And I find that having to put that effort in and risking losing them if I don't just adds stress for me. Whereas I find it quite hard to lose my Anthurium. Now, looking back, I do think a lot of those struggles were things that probably wouldn't be a problem anymore. So things like, as soon as I was struggling, I put them on a heat mat, which I think was, and then I'd get really confused that my alocasia that everyone said make sure it's damp and put it on a heat mat and 100% humidity, they were rotting. I think it was too much heat and too much humidity given my household environments. So it's all things I could solve probably now, but if you find a groove within your plants where you're absolutely loving them and they love you and it's way less stress, awesome. I am thinking for this channel I should probably get some of the plants that early on I found really difficult and see if I can grow them well now. The cool thing is, so with alocasia, ferns, calatheas, things like that, I've successfully helped other people grow them, my clients, because I can take the logic of how plants work and how they want to live and apply that to the different plants and where they should naturally be, and so what they enjoy. It just might be that they don't suit my house and my personal growing style and methods as well as they do my clients. So sometimes it could come down to, I know all the science for keeping this plant alive, but me and this plant just don't mesh well. And so instead of fighting it and trying to force something to happen that just ain't really happening, let's move to something I'm just going to really enjoy nice and easy. So anyway, that's my rant around humidity, growing conditions, and I guess a lot of other plant care stuff. Now, keep in mind, most of this will transfer across genuses. It's all about learning what your plants need, what they like, and what they can adjust to. And it might take a bit of experimenting to figure that out for your home and your environment, but make some plant friends, be in the Facebook groups, help grow this channel into a community where we can do these things, have fun, ask for help, talk about it. I am going to stop rambling. I hope this is helpful to someone, at least. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. As corny as it is to say, please hit like, subscribe, follow to see more. I have filmed the Anthurium collection tour, and I just need to edit that, and then I will film the rest of my houseplant tour tomorrow for all of my non-Anthurium plants that I'm sure people are wondering if I even own at this point. But yeah, let's have fun. Have fun growing. Please ask any questions down below if I've missed anything. And yeah, I hope you have an awesome Sunday. Enjoy your plants, enjoy your family, enjoy whatever you're up to. And I look forward to seeing you next time.